What happens when silence stops being a sign of weakness and becomes a weapon? Most people don't realize it, but every interaction is governed by invisible rhythms. One side sets the tempo, the other follows. One side observes, the other reacts. And the person who reacts first always loses control. We live in an age of noise. Constant messages, endless notifications, emotional impulses disguised as urgency. Everyone is fighting to be heard, to be seen, to feel important. But in this chaos, the loudest voice isn't the one that shapes reality. It's the one that holds its silence with precision, the one who doesn't rush to explain, justify, or chase, the one who knows the power of waiting. Silence unsettles people. It interrupts patterns. It takes the rhythm they rely on and snaps it in half. Most people panic in that gap. They fill it with desperate texts, explanations, clarifications, and emotional breadcrumbs. They try to keep the connection alive through noise. But those who understand psychological power do the opposite. They step back. They erase their presence strategically. They let the other side hear their absence. The truth is brutal. The moment you stop reacting, you stop being predictable. And when you stop being predictable, you stop being controllable. That's when the balance of power quietly begins to tilt. Think about how most interactions unfold. One person gives attention instantly, responds fast, explains everything, keeps the conversation alive. The other observes, takes their time, controls the tempo. It looks harmless, even romantic, but underneath, it's psychological chess. And the predictable player is always the piece, never the one moving it. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Power isn't in the external world, it's in the ability to govern yourself. He who can master his reactions controls the entire field, not because he forces anything, but because his silence and discipline create psychological gravity. Others adjust around him, others wonder, hesitate, question. Silence doesn't scream, it whispers into their insecurities. And here lies the paradox that most never grasp. The less you do, the more they feel. The less you speak, the louder your absence becomes. The less predictable you are, the more their mind starts to orbit you. People don't obsess over what's clear. They obsess over what's uncertain. And strategic silence turns you into that uncertainty. Most people never experience this shift because they can't endure the discomfort. The moment the other side pulls back, they chase. The moment there's silence, they fill it. They hand over their power, one impulsive action at a time. And then they wonder why they're always the ones waiting, explaining, hoping. This isn't about becoming manipulative. It's about reversing a psychological habit that keeps you powerless. It's about reclaiming your position on the board, not with noise, but with clarity. It's about understanding that silence, used correctly, is not passivity. It's an active, calculated stance that forces others to reveal themselves. Imagine for a moment, instead of reacting instantly, you pause. Instead of explaining, you observe. Instead of chasing, you disappear strategically. You stop feeding their sense of control. Day by day, your absence becomes heavier. What they once ignored becomes the very thing they think about before falling asleep. You haven't said a word, but their mind has been speaking to itself non-stop. That's the essence of Stoic strategy in modern power games. It's not about fighting louder. It's about shifting your energy inward, mastering your impulses, and letting silence do what words never could. This is the path most will never walk, because it requires inner strength. It requires holding your position when everything inside you wants to break formation. It requires understanding that silence doesn't always give immediate results, but it always plants seeds in the other person's mind. Seeds of doubt, curiosity, insecurity, attraction, respect. Over the next sections, you'll see how this strategy unfolds step by step, how psychological dynamics shift when you stop reacting, how emotional control can quietly dismantle power structures without confrontation, how silence can transform not just your interactions, but your identity. If you're ready to step out of the noise and take back control of your presence, this is your blueprint. And if this kind of content resonates with you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications to never miss the next strategy. You can also support this work directly by clicking the Super Thanks button below. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep these insights coming and spreads Stoic clarity to more people who need it. This isn't a trick. It's not a performance. It's a way of reclaiming yourself. Because once you learn to hold your silence with purpose, everything changes. What happened between you wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. It was a quiet examination, a silent probe of your boundaries. They weren't testing your heart. They were testing how much ground they could take before you pushed back. Every call for your attention, every subtle pull on your energy, was a way to measure the limits of your availability. People like to romanticize this as love, but it's usually a game of control wrapped in sentiment. The real question beneath every interaction is simple. Who sets the rhythm? Who leads and who follows? Who holds the emotional terrain? As long as you're the one initiating, explaining, asking, and showing up, you're not in control. You've handed it over inch by inch. This is where a dangerous asymmetry takes root. One side keeps pushing, gauging how strong your need for connection is. The other gets used to being the center without having to offer much in return. Every immediate reply, every follow-up message, every attempt to convince them signals the same thing. You dictate the pace, and I dance to it. Most people miss this turning point completely. They try to balance the lack of effort from the other side with more investment of their own. But that doesn't restore equilibrium. It creates dependency. You become predictable. You become a fixed point on their map, a safe harbor they don't need to respect because they assume you'll always be there. Stoic philosophy makes one thing clear: power begins the moment you reclaim control over yourself. If your every move depends on how they act, you're not steering the ship, you're cargo. You're not playing chess, you're a piece on their board, moved at their convenience. This pattern is universal. It shows up in romantic relationships, friendships, even passing connections. The one who controls the reaction controls the game. And that's exactly what the other person is testing, consciously or not. They want to see how far you'll go. Whether you can detach or whether the moment they step back you panic and chase. That isn't love. It's psychological probing. Most don't notice it because they're emotionally entangled. They read distance as an invitation to give more. In truth, it's a quiet challenge. Will you play by my rules or leave the board? Each time you respond to distance with urgency, you confirm the dynamic. You say without words, your unpredictability dictates my behavior. And with that, the axis of power tilts entirely toward them. The critical shift is recognizing the real game being played. It's not about affection, it's about emotional positioning. Once you see this, your perspective changes. You stop seeing someone who doesn't love you enough. You start seeing someone who is measuring your reactions like a scientist watching a subject. Here is where Stoicism steps in. The Stoic recognizes the test and quietly exits the playing field. He isn't led by uncertainty but by principles, self-control, clarity, and distance. He refuses to let someone else's inconsistency dictate his state. When you adopt this perspective, the emotional chaos loses its grip. You start to see the mechanics. Patterns become visible. What looked like rejection is exposed as a mirror. They're testing whether you lose yourself when they withdraw. At that moment, the game becomes predictable. Because once you understand that this isn't a love story but a control test, you begin to take the reins back. Not through explanations, not through confrontations, but through the one thing they never anticipate: cold, strategic distance. The most common mistake in this dynamic is deceptively simple. You react. Too fast, too emotionally, too predictably. Each unanswered message, each delay, each slight withdrawal awakens a need in you to fix the connection. You text immediately. You explain yourself. You beg for reassurance. And that cements the imbalance. The other side senses it, maybe not rationally, but instinctively. Your constant availability teaches them that they control the tempo. They know, if I step back, he'll come anyway. In that moment, you've already surrendered the power structure. Emotional reactivity is like an open book. They don't need to figure you out. They already know the next page. What was once intriguing becomes obvious. The chase ends. A Stoic doesn't react on impulse. He observes. He maintains inner distance. He understands that not every empty space must be filled, that silence is not defeat but a weapon. By rushing to respond to every subtle cue, You rob them of the chance to feel your absence. You close the gap before it forms, and by doing that, you kill the very tension that could make them reach out to you. The truth is brutal. They're measuring your response time, even if unconsciously. The faster you reply, the clearer the picture becomes. You're waiting, hoping, following. In a world where everyone screams to be seen, true power belongs to the one who doesn't react, the one who keeps distance, the one who remains unreadable. In an environment addicted to noise, silence becomes a disturbance, and the silent figure becomes the unpredictable variable no one can control. When you train yourself to resist the urge to answer immediately, a psychological shift occurs. You're no longer the respondent, you become the unknown factor. That's where power begins. Every impulsive message you send out of fear of being forgotten is a small surrender of authority. The solution isn't some clever trick, it's discipline. By allowing the gap to exist, you create something people have grown unaccustomed to: uncertainty. And uncertainty forces them out of passivity. Once you stop plugging every silence with your words, the dynamic reverses. They're the ones who start looking for signals. This is the foundation. If you want to reverse the game, you must understand: power isn't reclaimed with words. It's taken back through silence and distance. A strategic withdrawal is not passive. It's a precise, calculated maneuver that alters the entire psychological landscape. The first step is brutally simple. Cut the noise. No spontaneous check-ins, no explanations, no harmless little "just wanted to say hi." You don't disappear in a dramatic flare. You quietly step back consistently and without fanfare. In a hyper-reactive world, silence is like a glitch in the system. People expect immediate reassurance. Your withdrawal creates a vacuum they never saw coming. The goal isn't to punish them, it's to break the rhythm. As long as you keep knocking on the door, nothing changes. But when you stop, you send a signal more powerful than any speech. I am not a given. That signal rearranges the psychological hierarchy without a single confrontation. The second step: introduce unpredictability. They used to know exactly how you'd respond. They had your rhythm mapped out. Now they don't. You don't reply on cue. Maybe not at all. You offer no explanations. You ignore subtle hooks. You stop handing out emotional guarantees like candy. And suddenly they lose their script. This unpredictability is essential. People grow attached to patterns like a heartbeat. When the beat skips, insecurity sets in. And insecurity is the seed from which psychological shifts grow. The third step: change the arena. As long as you remain on their turf, their platforms, their messages, their rhythm, you stay reactive. So you exit entirely. No lurking likes, no quiet story views, no digital breadcrumbs to remind them you exist. You vacate the stage. This shift has a deep effect. They no longer control the frame. You pull the curtain down on the theater they felt safe in. That's when pressure starts to build. Silence doesn't hit all at once. At first they shrug it off, assuming it's temporary. But with each passing day, the quiet grows heavier. Their mind starts filling in what you no longer provide. Questions surface. Uncertainty spreads like ink through water. Consistency is everything here. Strategic withdrawal only works if you don't break formation halfway through. Sending a message after 3 days undoes the entire effect. It signals, my silence was just a tactic, not a real shift. And they stop taking it seriously. A real withdrawal means holding the line even when every instinct inside you screams to reach out. That's the moment most people fail. And that's exactly where your leverage is born. A Stoic understands that this isn't a performance. It's self-mastery in motion. You're not making yourself smaller, you're becoming defined. You step out of the background noise that once drowned you out. You stop trying to be understood and start controlling your presence through absence. From this point on, no explanations, no justifications, no covert signals. Only silence, distance, and unpredictability. 3 simple tools that reshape the psychological terrain. The longer you hold this posture, the more pressure builds. Their usual sense of control fractures. Their ego begins to churn. And that's when their perception starts to shift entirely. You've made your first real move, not loud, not emotional, but cold and calculated. Strategic withdrawal isn't a theory. It's a psychological trigger with real, lasting effects. When you cut the usual contact, when you disrupt the rhythm they relied on, something starts to unravel in their mind. You no longer need to do the work. Silence does it for you. At first, nothing seems to happen. They text less, maybe not at all. Some even feel a sense of relief, as if a noise in the background has suddenly stopped. Many assume your silence is temporary, a passing mood, but that's where the first psychological hook is set. Their attachment to your presence runs deeper than they realize. After a few days, the atmosphere shifts. They pick up their phone, scroll through old conversations, check your last activity. Curiosity creeps in, not out of affection, but from the discomfort of losing control. Someone who woke up to a message from you every morning now faces an empty screen. Day 1 feels neutral. By day 3, a quiet void forms. By day 7, that void becomes a question they can't silence. People are terrible at living with open loops. If you were always the one to initiate and suddenly stop, a vacuum forms. And in that vacuum, they begin to feel exactly what you once felt: uncertainty. Your withdrawal works like a mirror. They see themselves in the space you left behind. All the gestures they took for granted start to reappear in their mind as missing puzzle pieces. A call that no longer comes, a message that never arrives, a gaze that isn't returned. This absence grows heavier with time. It starts with harmless thoughts like "strange, they haven't texted," and ends with "did I do something wrong? Are they gone? Is there someone else?" Silence forces them to invent stories to fill the gaps. The mind hates unanswered questions. Another familiar example: you used to react to their posts. Then, one day, it all stops. No likes, no comments, no quiet signals. At first, they ignore it. 2 weeks later, they notice something has shifted. They begin posting strategically, hoping to trigger your attention. That's when the psychological proof begins. You don't need grand gestures. The absence of your usual energy is enough to unsettle them. And the longer you remain quiet, the stronger this effect becomes. This pressure isn't born of passive aggression. It comes from the sudden removal of what they considered guaranteed. People rarely value what's always available. But when it disappears, it dominates their thoughts. This process unfolds without a single word from you. No explanations, no hints, no justifications. Your consistent distance speaks louder than anything you could say. Here lies the true Stoic power. You control yourself, not their reaction. You create the conditions under which their perception reshapes itself. Over time, silence grows so tangible they can't ignore it. Their thoughts orbit around what's missing, and from that quiet void, the impulse to reach out emerges. This is where the roles begin to shift. You're no longer the pursuer. They become the one reacting, not because of something you did, but because absence became louder than presence. Up until this point, you've interrupted the dynamic. You've silenced the noise, broken the patterns, and carved out space. Now comes the crucial part, the posture you adopt. Silence alone isn't enough. The stance behind it changes everything. Many see withdrawal as a temporary tactic to provoke attention, but the Stoic perspective runs deeper. It's about stepping into a new position where you no longer react, you set the tone. Elegant indifference doesn't mean you don't care about the other person. It means your state is no longer hostage to their behavior. You don't define your worth by their attention. You don't respond to chase validation. You respond only when you consciously decide it's necessary. In this phase, the entire focus shifts. Once you were the one fighting to keep the connection alive, now you're the one standing still while the other side begins to move. You stop orbiting them. They start orbiting you. You're no longer a supplicant. You're the gravitational center. This demands discipline. The urge to respond to their first signals is strong. Suddenly they message again, drop subtle hints, test if you've truly changed. In that moment, a short, cold reply, or none at all, carries more weight than any emotional explanation. It's the silence after their move that unnerves them. The Stoic stance here is clear. There's nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to justify. You deliberately choose where your energy goes. And that choice is what creates authority, not volume, but control. With time, a new power dynamic emerges. The other side senses that something in you has shifted. They can no longer rely on your old reflexes. Your silence is no longer passive. It's a boundary, and boundaries command respect. Consider a familiar pattern. Once you answered every message instantly, often with lengthy explanations. Now you wait, hours, sometimes days, not out of pettiness, but from inner calm. Your time and attention are no longer a buffet they can access at will. This composure unsettles those accustomed to your former availability. They realize they no longer have direct, predictable access to you, and this mild irritation slowly turns into respect. They notice that you no longer respond the way you used to. You're protecting your energy, and they feel the difference. Stoic indifference isn't emotional coldness. It's a conscious decision to live by your standards, not theirs. You respond not because you have to, but because you choose to, or not at all. In this moment, your presence takes on a new quality. You're no longer treated as a constant. You're seen as someone with clear edges, someone who can't be taken for granted. And boundaries paradoxically increase attraction. If you maintain this posture consistently, a quiet but tangible shift takes place. They begin to respect your stillness, even if they never admit it out loud. They feel that access to you is no longer a right, it's a privilege, and privileges can be withdrawn. This is the core of the Stoic turn. You no longer wait for validation. You give it to yourself by controlling your reactions. You act not out of fear, but out of clarity, and clarity makes you unpredictable, and therefore psychologically powerful. This phase is where emotional control returns to you. You've reshaped the field, not through confrontation, but through stance, and stance is felt even in silence. Theory without practice is useless. At this stage, strategy must translate into daily behavior. Silence and distance only have power when applied with precision and consistency. The goal isn't isolation, it's control over the rhythm. Step 1. Control your response time. In the past, you replied instantly, driven by fear of being forgotten or losing something. Now you alter the tempo. You reply hours later, sometimes not at all. Not to play games, but to signal clearly. Your reactions are no longer automatic. This delay is more powerful than most expect. People are used to immediate access. When the expected response doesn't arrive, uncertainty sets in. They start rereading their own words, questioning themselves. Pressure builds in the gap, and that pressure works for you. Step 2. Keep your words tight. When you do respond, you keep it clear, brief, and free of emotional justifications. No explaining, no persuading, no reaching for closeness. A short, neutral sentence carries more weight than a paragraph of reassurance. This shifts the entire conversational dynamic. Before, they drove the dialogue while you kept it alive. Now the roles invert. They invest. You decide if and how you respond. Step 3. Control the flow of information. Stop broadcasting your life. Before, they always knew what you were doing, where you were, how you felt. Now you share selectively, no constant updates, no breadcrumbs. You become harder to read. This controlled opacity triggers a psychological effect. People fill in blanks with their own stories. When they no longer know everything, curiosity creeps in. Sometimes even nervousness. Their familiar sense of certainty begins to crack. Step 4. Dial down your digital presence. No likes, no small reactions, no subtle signs of life. Many sabotage their own withdrawal by remaining half-present online, undermining the effect. When you retreat, do it fully. Step 5. Don't test them. The temptation to send small signals to see if they care is strong. But each time you do, you reveal that you're still tethered inside. True strength is in not testing, but letting the process work on its own. Step 6. Set internal boundaries. Silence is only powerful when it comes from inner stillness. If you use it to force a reaction, it loses its edge. Your silence must not be a tactic. It must be an expression of your stance. Together, these elements form a practical system. You control time, language, information, digital presence, and your impulses. This is how you reclaim the emotional terrain. In the beginning, this will feel unfamiliar. You'll sense inner restlessness, the urge to respond, explain, or test. This is the critical turning point. If you hold your ground and do nothing, the strategy begins to work for you. With time, this new behavior becomes your default. You don't rely on tactics anymore because your posture is clear. The other side feels that they can no longer summon you at will. If they want access, they have to move. This isn't a rigid manual, it's a toolbox. The more disciplined you are in applying it, the stronger the psychological impact. Silence, distance, and control aren't short-term tricks. They're a long-term positional shift. If you follow through consistently, the dynamic doesn't just change on the surface, the psychological terrain on their side begins to shift. What looked like indifference at first slowly turns into unease, then uncertainty, and finally a quiet inner pressure they can't ignore. The first days seem harmless. They tell themselves your silence doesn't affect them. They assume you'll reach out eventually, like always. This confidence is an illusion built on old patterns, not on the new reality you've created. As time passes, silence starts to work. They scroll through old messages, reread between the lines, search for proof that you're still there. This curiosity is the first crack in their facade, not an admission, but the start of a loop in their mind. The longer the silence stretches, the tighter that loop wins. Thoughts circle endlessly. Why haven't they messaged? Did I miss something? Is there someone else? Their mind tries to fill the blanks, generating stories often far more intense than reality. This self-generated tension is powerful. You don't need to speak or act. They feed their own doubt. Every hour without a response amplifies the uncertainty. Every day without a sign deepens the pressure. Over time, uncertainty turns into emotional stress. Some try to distract themselves, but the void remains. What was once taken for granted has become a question mark, and that question mark follows them everywhere. The pattern is classic. Curiosity comes first, then testing. They send a casual message, a small comment, a subtle signal, just to see if the old rhythm still works. When you don't respond like before, the second crack appears. Their old levers stop working. Then comes loss of control. The feeling of having you evaporates. It's replaced by the realization that access is gone. That realization hits quietly, but deeply. It scrapes at their ego, their self-image, their sense of dominance in the situation. Often this leads to a moment of internal confrontation. They see, often for the first time, how much they took your presence for granted. What once went unnoticed becomes painfully visible. Silence turns into a mirror, reflecting truths they avoided. This effect doesn't erupt suddenly. It builds slowly, layer by layer. First irritation, then uncertainty, then the need to regain control. When that fails, frustration sets in. And frustration easily morphs into obsession. Obsession doesn't come from conviction, but from an inability to release what they no longer control. The void you've created becomes their mental focal point. They check their phone more often, watch for signals, dissect details. Imagine someone who ignored your presence for weeks. Once you retreat, they respond with indifference. 3 weeks later, they invent excuses to accidentally reach out. They comment on things they once overlooked. Their behavior grows restless as their grip slips. These reactions are not coincidences. They are direct consequences of your stance. By holding the line, you force them to face reality. You are no longer a given. That realization cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. The psychological collapse in silence isn't explosive. It's a steady, tightening pressure that grows over time. Uncertainty seeps into their routines, their thoughts, their perception. When this point arrives, the power balance has completely shifted. You're no longer chasing. They are the ones adjusting. And this happens not because you demanded it, but because the reality you created forces their hand. At the end of this process, there's no game left, only a clear shift in position. You stopped reacting, withdrew, embraced silence, broke the rhythm, and destabilized their sense of security. But now comes the decisive step, turning your gaze inward. A Stoic mindset means you no longer draw your value from the reactions of others. You don't need their validation to know your place. You understand that your energy is finite, your presence is costly, and it's you, not them, who decides who gets access. This isn't revenge, it's self-respect sharpened into quiet power. The shift is subtle but unmistakable. The other side senses it. They can't reach you with the same old moves anymore. Your silence, your composure, your clarity, all of it creates a kind of psychological distance that demands respect without uttering a single word. They feel the boundary, even if they can't articulate it. You are no longer the one waiting for a reply. You've become the place to which people must return if they want a space in your world. This reversal isn't just external, it rewires how you perceive yourself. You stop orbiting others. They start adjusting their movements around you. And that, quietly, is power. At this stage, their response matters less and less. What matters is that you've broken the old dependency loop. You no longer act to chase, prove, or soothe. You act because you decide. That clarity makes you immovable. There's nothing left to force, nothing to beg for, nothing to prove. When you embody this stance consistently, your entire lens on people and situations shifts. You begin to see with surgical clarity who genuinely respects you and who simply consumes your presence. You invest more strategically. You choose carefully. You act slowly with intention. That's the real prize of this process. Not some theatrical victory over others, but an inner recalibration that makes you unshakable. Silence and strategic withdrawal are not temporary tactics. They are the architecture of a new way of existing. You stop being reactive background noise in someone else's story and become the one who sets the tempo. And that's why this transformation is irreversible. Once you've experienced what it's like to hold your ground in silence, you can't return to the old patterns. At this point, many people make the mistake of slipping back into the old rhythm when the other side reaches out. They receive a message, a gesture, or a nostalgic signal, and they immediately revert to their former, hyper-available selves. But this stage isn't about celebrating attention, it's about holding the line. It's about proving to yourself that your silence wasn't a tactic, but a foundation. You'll notice something powerful. Once you stop needing reactions, the entire dynamic turns. You no longer cling to outcomes. You don't craft words to elicit emotions. You're rooted in your own authority. Whether they respond or not becomes irrelevant, because you've already taken your power back. That inner detachment is what people feel, often long before they admit it. And as that detachment deepens, your presence acquires gravity. You stop explaining yourself, you stop over-communicating. You don't offer guarantees to keep others comfortable. You're simply there, quiet, selective, unbothered. That's when people realize that access to you isn't guaranteed anymore. It has to be earned. The Stoic perspective here is simple but rare. Stop letting external validation define your rhythm. Anchor yourself internally, and everything else adjusts around you. Silence becomes not a void, but a signal. Distance becomes not absence, but structure. Composure becomes not weakness, but strength disguised as stillness. Apply what you've absorbed deliberately. This isn't a performance or a quick trick to make someone miss you. It's a way of taking ownership of your energy and your direction. Use silence, strategic withdrawal, and firm boundaries as ongoing practices, not temporary tactics. Over time, they don't just change relationships, they change you. This is how you build a life where you're no longer driven by reaction, but by principle, where your decisions come from clarity, not fear, where your value isn't negotiated in someone else's emotional marketplace, but established by your own posture. If this message has resonated with you, consider supporting this work so it can reach more people. You can click the Super Thanks button below to contribute in any amount. It helps keep this content alive and daily, and it tells the algorithm that voices like this matter. And of course, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next strategy. Your support isn't charity, it's a way of saying this perspective has value. Take this strategy not as a manipulation tool, but as a framework for genuine transformation. Your calm is not emptiness, it's your foundation. And when you learn to hold it, truly hold it, everything around you shifts.